Welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. This episode is a little different than most of the episodes I make throughout the year. By design, this is pretty light work for me. I don't really have a script. I'm not going to do a bunch of editing. I'm really just talking to you off the top of my head. I did this last year. I shared my favorite comics of the past year, and I had to limit it to 10, otherwise I'd be talking forever, because there were a lot of fantastic comic books, a lot of fantastic moments, and a lot of fantastic creators. But I wanted to just discuss my personal top 10 comics. So it's a little bit of an insight into me, you could say, but it's also my strong recommendations, and if you enjoy this show, maybe that will mean something to you. I'd also love to have a little bit of a discussion in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your favorite comics of 2018 were. So, this is going to be my top 10, no particular order, just my 10 favorite comics of the year. Without any further preamble, let's get into it. Number 1, Nancy. I never would have expected to list a daily comic strip in my top 10 comics, let alone one based on a character who's been appearing since 1933. Her original artist, Ernie Bushmiller, was a clever cartoonist who would do meta things with the comic strip, but it settled into a pretty bland comic over the years, like most comic strips do. But in 2018, it was taken over by Olivia James, a female cartoonist who's working under a pen name and has kept her identity hidden. The strips tend to now be absurd and bizarre, so it probably doesn't appeal to a mainstream audience, but it makes me laugh out loud. So any comic that provokes that strong a reaction has to make it into my top 10. Number 2, X-Men Grand Design. I happen to love both indie comics and the X-Men. So X-Men Grand Design by Ed Piskor is right up my alley. Piskor is a Kubert School student who broke in working on indie stuff like Harvey Picar's American Splendor. But he's also a fan of comics and has spoken of how he loves artists like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee that he grew up reading. His ongoing X-Men Grand Design series is incredibly ambitious, encapsulating their history into a single condensed story. His initial story arc told the story of the original X-Men, but in 2018 he began adapting the all-new X-Men by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, among others. Piskor cuts out the redundancy and subplots that don't really go anywhere and focuses on the main narrative with the benefit of hindsight so that he can focus on the emotional beats that paid off and build to them in an extremely satisfying manner. It's also a pretty good way for newer readers to understand the important parts of X-Men history. If you enjoy this book, I also strongly encourage you to check out the YouTube channel Comics Kayfabe, run by Piskor and Jim Rugg, the creator of Street Angel. Some good comic book knowledge there. Number 3, Mr. Miracle. Tom King is becoming one of my favorite modern-day comics writers. I enjoy his work on Batman and loved his run on Vision at Marvel. Mr. Miracle combines the elements he's best at: big action and complicated family relationships. Mr. Miracle is a complex character. He's an escape artist, a god who has been traded to the villainous dark side to broker a peace, and a husband to Big Barda. This book requires no prior knowledge, but uses all of these elements. It involves both an epic war between New Genesis and Apocalypse, two planets of gods, and his relationship with his wife and welcoming someone new into their family. There's also the possibility that what Mr. Miracle is experiencing may not be reality. It's fiercely intimate, expansively epic, and confusingly surreal in turns. And the artwork by Mitch Gerads is incredible. Number 4, Spectacular Spider-Man. For almost 2 years, Chip Zdarsky wrote and occasionally illustrated the Spectacular Spider-Man title. Ironically, it featured a back-to-basics street-level aesthetic instead of too many spectacular stories about aliens or time travel. This title was at turns emotional, exciting, and hilarious. His final issue is especially great at encapsulating his take on Peter Parker and how his community views him. Zdarsky has helped Peter Parker evolve into a confident man who acknowledges his guilt but is not crippled by it. Number 5, my heroes have always been junkies. I've been a fan of the team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips since Sleeper back in 2003. They specialize in crime fiction, but I've enjoyed all of their collaborations, so I picked up their first graphic novel, Sight Unseen. As expected, it had great art and complex characters with hidden motivations and deep flaws. Suffice it to say, by the end of this tragic romance, there is a subtle connection to their ongoing cluster of miniseries Criminal. But mostly, it's a very focused character portrait of a woman who has some strange personal heroes. Number 6, My Hero Academia. My personal favorite ongoing superhero book this year was My Hero Academia, when it came to just fun action. This book reminds me of New Mutants. It's all about students in training to become future superheroes. 2018 started off with the most beloved and powerful superhero, All Might, going up against his archenemy in a final battle. Flowing out of that, his student Deku finally began to become his own man, evolving his personal fighting style and gaining new levels of confidence. The book has a massive cast of likable characters and some gorgeous, engaging, and detailed artwork full of energy. Number 7, Frankenstein by Junji Ito. I've made an episode about how Junji Ito does the best horror comics today. But the idea of him adapting a classic horror novel, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, was unexpected to say the least. Ito's monster is absolutely horrific, and it doesn't shy away from the idea of corpse parts being put together. But a lot of Shelley's novel is spent dealing with Dr. Frankenstein himself and what drives him to pursue his bizarre scientific experiments. And the storytelling in this comic is assured and expressive. It's a match I never would have seen coming, but it's quite loyal, and it makes for a great take on something that's been adapted many times before. Number 8, X-Men Red. The fact that there are 2 X-Men comics in my top 10 list is both a surprise and a pleasure. X-Men Red is a fantastic jumping on point for folks who don't know much about the X-Men. It's a news story that takes a few established X-Men like Jean Grey and Nightcrawler and mixes in several newer characters like Honey Badger, Gentle, and Trinary. I've never really connected with the Jean Grey character. She's been in some great stories, but I never felt like I really understood her. Writer Tom Taylor has her spearheading her own team with a new mission to create a mutant nation where her people are accepted and respected by the UN. There's plenty of action, but also some political intrigue. Solid art by Mahmoud Asrar too. I definitely recommend this if you don't know X-Men well or are looking for a way back to them. Number 9, The Joe Shuster Story. Even if you already know the broad strokes of Joe Shuster's life, the man who co-created and illustrated Superman, this comic portrays it with new detail and intimacy. The artwork by Thomas Campy is bright and pulpy, which helps offset the fact that this is a pretty sad story. Siegel and Shuster sold Superman to DC Comics, and DC got rich off of it, and Siegel and Shuster did not. This title shows us who Shuster was as a man, from his working-class upbringing in Cleveland, to meeting and befriending Siegel, to negotiating their deal with DC, and the aftermath. Shuster's eyesight failed, and after his Superman contract was up, he couldn't find much work. His story deserves to be remembered, and this book is a loving tribute. Number 10, Batman White Knight. I would have bought Batman White Knight for the Sean Gordon Murphy artwork alone, but this clever inversion of a Batman falling over the edge and a Joker who has been rendered sane by an experimental drug makes it a good read too. We get to meet 2 different Harley Quinns, see Batgirl and Nightwing sign up with the Gotham City Police, and a Joker who runs a political campaign to save Gotham from itself. It's a blast. So that's my personal top 10 comics for 2018. Not necessarily the easiest to put together, but I feel pretty confident that that was my top 10. And I would be very curious what some of your favorites were. I would love to see if there's anything I missed, or I would suspect there are some that sort of were in my honorable mentions list that a lot of people might mention. There were a lot of great comics this year. So I don't think we'll have trouble finding 10 or 20 more really good titles in the comments. But speaking of the comments, I wanted to thank you. This channel had a fantastic year. 2018 was very, very good to me. We started with less than 5,000 subscribers. We're ending with more than 36,000. That's some really good growth. It's a lot of work. You know, this is just me creating everything. So I've got a full-time job. It takes me, you know, a little more than 40 hours every week. And I have just a really weird schedule where I'm working different days every week. So it can be very, very hard to carve out the time necessary to write and, you know, record and then, of course, edit everything week after week. But I want to do it. I do enjoy it, and I enjoy it because it seems to resonate with a lot of people out there. I've heard some amazing comments. A lot of you have been very generous with things like supporting my Patreon page, buying artwork, sending super chats when I do live streams to draw or just talk to you. So it's been a fantastic 2018. I really cannot thank all of you enough. Even if you're just subscribing, maybe sharing these videos, that means so much to me. It really does. I would love for this channel to more than double. I don't know if that's realistic. I have no idea what the ceiling is, you know? I have no idea. But all I know is I do enjoy making this show. I enjoy talking to all of you about our shared passion for this medium. It's so versatile. You can do so much. I mean, look at the comics I was listing here. I mean, it's got manga, it's got comic strips, it's got, you know, in other words, funny stuff, horror, action, superheroes, crime fiction. There's so many great comics out there today. We live in a great, great time for good comics. There's plenty of crap, but that's true anytime. If you cut through all of that, there's some amazing stuff here. Anyway, lots of random thoughts off the top of my dome. Pretty soon, I will be back to just making regular weekly episodes. I think you're going to like what we have in January and beyond. Anyway, thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. And hey, you know what you could do to help is keep reading comics.